Welcome, everybody, to the third episode of The Spectacle with Scott McKay and me, Melissa McKenzie, the publisher of The American Spectator. We are hopefully going to get better and better. Both Scott and I have been looking at our previous two podcasts and see some work we need to do, and so we're going to do it. And today we have so many topics to talk about that we need to get right into it. The first one has, I don't know if we should do a blood boiler out of the gate. Usually, it's like a sweet story to start or something. But in this case, there was an article over at the Atlantic, and the chick who wrote it wants COVID amnesty. And in her first story in the article, she was talking about going on a walk outside with bandanas on each of her family members' faces, Scott, and her son felt emboldened, felt self-righteous enough, that little shitty kid yelled at some neighbor and screamed the words social distancing. And now this lady, who's raised a mini tyrant, wants amnesty for her and for all of her, the other 50 whatever percent of the country who made life freaking miserable for everyone. They want amnesty now. Scott, what do you think about that?
Let's see. How do we get all of this in the time we've allotted for it? Because that's one of the innovations that we're trying to put in place for this third episode, is to actually stay within a time budget. And of course, we went and picked an issue that we could probably talk about for 6 hours.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I did not read this entire Atlantic piece. I couldn't. I got about to that story and a little beyond it and skipped through it and was so incensed that I had to put it down. And the thing is again, we're recording this on Tuesday, and tonight I'm actually writing a piece at the American Spectator about this horrible article. So I have to go back in, which I am dreading. But the good news is that I can summon up enough outrage to bang out my piece in about 10 minutes. Look, here's the thing, and there's a massive, massive problem with this, and I don't want to read too much into it, but there's sort of like this whole kind of, hey, we're all kind of Christians here and Christians forgive. And it's like, yeah, you don't really understand any of this, because before there's forgiveness, there is repentance and there is penance. And I don't see any repentance and I don't see any penance. What I do see is an entire political party full of people who did exactly what you say, which is to make life miserable, deliberately make life miserable for everybody in the country. Not only that, they did it to make us satisfied with less. Remember, these people kept talking about the new normal, right? Oh, well, it's because of COVID and we do this. And oh, this is our great excuse to do the Great Reset and yada, yada, yada. And these people were actually fired up and happy about the fact that the control government was getting out of the COVID pandemic was making things possible for them that they otherwise wouldn't do. They kept talking about how, oh, wait, we'll just pivot to climate change and keep this going and people will get used to it and it'll be fine, right? And the worst of it was this. And, Trump was president. And of course, all of this was about getting Trump to a very large degree, right? Which is just 100% unforgivable under any circumstances. But when, and Trump's, his instincts on COVID were good, right? He looked at the numbers from the very beginning. He says, you know what? This isn't going to kill the vast majority of the people that get it, okay? Which means we can treat this, we can get herd immunity, which every virus ultimately is gonna become, whatever, because people will get some form of natural immunity to it when enough people get it, and so forth. And he said, okay, so fine, I'll do 2 weeks to slow
stop the spread. 14 days to stop the spread.
Once we've staffed up the medical, professions or the hospitals or whatever, and we've given them all the stuff that they need, and we've made all the masks and done all this kind of stuff, then after that, we're going back to normal. And then he started talking about, look, we got to treat this thing, right? It's important that we treat it. And No sooner did that happen, and this was because Big Pharma didn't looked at it and said, well, we can't make any money off of hydroxychloroquine. And because Trump talked about hydroxychloroquine, all of a sudden there was this wacko woman in Arizona that killed her husband with fish tank cleaner. And they said, oh, Donald Trump made her do it, right? And there was this entire narrative that affected every single attempt to treat the virus, right? Like to actually give people, whether it was common antiviral drugs that had a very good effect on this thing. Okay. I mean, like if you took HCQ or ivermectin early when you got COVID, you were going to beat COVID. Even if you had comorbidities, it was going to help you beat COVID. Okay. And they shut that down. It got so bad. When I got COVID, which was Christmas of 2021. Okay. And I got the Omicron variant. Okay. I was like really sick for a day and a half. And then after that, it was just mucus that I couldn't get rid of. So, you know, I called a doc friend and I said, look, I'm tired of this. Like I'm basically getting well, but I want to get rid of this. You know, I'm constantly blowing my nose. Get me some ivermectin. Will that work? He says, of course it'll work. He said, but I mean, I'll prescribe it to you. You can't find it. No pharmacists won't even prescribe this anymore. They've shut it down so much. He's like, just take vitamin D, 50,000 IUs of vitamin D. He said, it'll beat it. I'm like, really? He says, yeah, COVID it's a vitamin D deficiency is what it is. And I'm like, well, how come I'm hearing that now? He goes, oh, they won't let anybody say any of that. And the whole point is these very tyrants, these people who now want an amnesty for COVID because everything that they did turned out to be not just wrong, but destructively wrong. And at the time, when people were trying to get the word out about things you could do to actually make things better for your family so that people didn't die, people weren't sick as a dog for weeks on end, all the rest of it, to make this a manageable pandemic, they didn't want that. They didn't want that. And how many people died? How many people's lives were ruined? How many excess deaths based on these lockdowns did these tyrants and scumbags, how many of those people had their lives completely ruined based on the branch Covidian nuttery that these people put in place? And now they're, oh, you know, hey, you know, don't worry about it. I mean, we just, you know, like, let's just chalk this up to experience. And
you know why this is, wait a minute. You know why this is all coming out? It's because the Republicans are going to get back in and they're going to start frog marching the different CDC people to come through. And they don't want to have these kind of revelations that are there. You know, then we have the Senate committee that just came out and said, oh, yeah, by the way, we do think that the most likely thing that happened was a Wuhan lab leak. Well, you know, the problem is that way back at the beginning, when I said that Fauci was funding this and that his name is all over this stuff and that his, you know, these NGOs and stuff working with China. And you're like, what are we even doing helping gain of function research in China? Why these people? And the reason is because in America, the kind of research they're doing is illegal and unethical. And so they do this stuff over in China. Then China, oopsie, releases this virus out. And it all leads right back to America.
Yep.
And our money. So that's the big global thing. But on the particular level, people could not be with their wife while she was having a miscarriage in the hospital. People couldn't be with grandpa while my grandma languished for 2 years with no one being able to visit her in person. And she's over 100. If she dies from something, she's lived her life, but we're going to strip the last few years of her life of any dignity. And this happened everywhere. I'm infuriated that they want to just walk on. And in addition to that, these sanctimonious, absolutely self-righteous assholes were coming and telling other people, well, you want to kill grandma. They killed their children's education in service to this disease clearly affects older people more. So you protect them. You do what Ron DeSantis did in Florida. You protect the older people, but you do punish the people who are okay in this virus with this virus, and you let the children go to school. And so I wrote way back in 2021 at the beginning of the year that it was an abomination and completely racist that they were not sending inner city school children to school. So they put children who are already behind because of this kind of wacky ideology. And more than that, because the teachers' unions were selfish and didn't want to work and lazy. And so they don't want to go into the school system where they are exposed to every bug known to man because they're teachers, don't want to teach these children. And no one advocated for these kids. No one. And then we had the same people, and this really made me angry because there were debates on the right, Scott. There were debates on the same insider groups who were like, oh, no problem if somebody gets fired. Well, it's their choice not to take the vaccine. And I was like, these blue collar workers worked all the way through the pandemic. These nurses, these doctors, these grocery store workers. My son never got a day freaking off during this. He had to work at the grocery store. He was exposed every day. And now, because he may not want to get the vaccine, fire him? These people have no idea what they've done. And then they tore families apart because jerks like this writer, whose sanctimonious little shit kid is probably alienating half their family because they were like, well, we can't get together. Oh, you want to get together for Thanksgiving? Oh, you're a bad person. I mean, it's terrible.
Those holiday stories, okay, with the families that didn't have. I mean, I know so many people that went through that. It's not even funny, right? Yeah. Because they had the liberal brother or sister-in-law or whatever.
Right.
Oh, if you're not vaccinated, then we can't have Christmas. And,
right.
And like this has done so much damage to families all over the country. I mean, and it's just
you could go to Costco, but you couldn't go to church and take communion. Right. You could go to the bar.
Casino.
Yes, you could go to
all casinos were open, but not the churches, right? And I mean, there's a guy here where I am in Baton Rouge, Tony Spell, who's from the very beginning said, no, I'm not shutting down my church. There's nothing you can do. I mean, that's like, this is a classic First Amendment thing, and I'll go to the mattresses on it. And I mean, it went all the way basically to the U.S. Supreme Court of them trying to prosecute this guy,
right,
for holding church services. And I mean, I think that it's over. I think the Fifth Circuit basically laughed the state out of court. Okay. But I mean, this happened all over the place.
But he had to defend himself. And you had parents who were literally arrested in front of their children outdoors at a playground. They filled up skate parks. The healthiest place you could be would be outside being, 15 years old on a skateboard. You're perfect. You're going to be fine with life. And they filled it with sand. These people.
What about the paddleboard guy off of Malibu? They fished him out of the ocean to arrest him. I mean, and we're going to just let bygones be bygones? My answer to that is, I'll tell you what. First of all, every public official that was in office and perpetrated this crap has got to go. Like, they've either got to be voted out of office, and a damn good many of them are going to get voted out of office next week, which is good. That's number one. Number two, I want lawsuits. And of course, I can't have them because, particularly pharma, which, let's face it, Big Pharma was the number one outside of China and Fauci and Peter Daszak. Big Pharma was the number one villain here, okay? Because this was all profit driven with them. Common antiviral medications would have knocked us out for 80 to 85% of the population. All right. And they did everything they could to make sure that they put people on remdesivir instead of hydroxychloroquine, and remdesivir killed people. Right. The medical device profession. Oh, no, we need to go. We need billions and billions of dollars for ventilators. That killed 75% of the people they put on, and they put everybody on them.
Well, in New York, let me just tell you what they were doing. It's such a medical abomination that I can't believe that there aren't lawsuits right now about it. They would hook They hook people up to the respirator. The tubing they'd use would be so long because they didn't want the nurses or doctors in the room with these terrible, infected people. And so the people would be not only was the treatment counterproductive and made them sicker, but they were alone. So they didn't have any family or friends to advocate for them. And if you're at all familiar with the medical field, which I am, forget it. Somebody should never, ever go into the hospital alone. And so all these people were alone, and they not only were alone, they didn't even have a doctor or nurse. They'd bring the monitors and the tubing out of the room, have 25 feet of tubing, which is great for bacteria to grow because it's longer, it has more room to grow. Absolute evil, malpractice. And the thing is they all knew it. And the reason they were doing it is because it made them more money. And, it was like $20,000 a bed. So like if you put somebody on a vent and they were in a room, it was all about money.
Well, it was more than 20. It was like $39,000 that they gave them to put somebody on a vent. And they killed 75% of them. And we're supposed to just say, oh, let's have an amnesty for that? When we can't even do a lawsuit on this. You can't even file malpractice lawsuits because of the emergency use regulations and so forth that CDC and all these other federal agencies did. The entire medical profession, big pharma and all of it, they're completely immune from lawsuit. And we want amnesty. And I'm like, no, because you have to have some form of repentance in order to get forgiveness. And there's nobody's asking for that. None of the pharmaceutical companies haven't put a fund together and say, look, we made X amount of dollars. We're going to continue making billions of dollars because now the stupid Pfizer vaccine's $130 where it was 30 something before, and the government is still demanding that people take it. Right? They want to give kids this stuff, which now we know they haven't even studied it. They have no idea what it actually does to kids. And of course, everybody
unanimous
is talking about all of the side effects of this thing and myocarditis and all the rest of it. And so there's if Pfizer wants amnesty from this, and honestly, there should be major recriminations. We should totally revamp all of the FDA stuff, all of the federal statutes, all of this stuff needs a total reexamination under a Republican Congress. If you want to stave some of that off, fine. You put 50% of the money you made off of those vaccines into a fund, and you start paying out for people who have been injured by COVID vaccines.
They're not going to do that.
Then we can talk about getting back to square one, because right now this is a massive ripoff. So much damage has been done to civil liberty over the last 2 years as a result of quackery. This entire thing has been nothing. You talk about, we can't make fun of the medieval Europeans that when the Black Plague came along, all the stupid things they did, because we made worse mistakes with more information. And it was all based on politics and power, not medicine, not public health. And everybody, I want all of these federal agencies that are involved in, whether it's the FDA, CDC, especially the NIH, I want every one of these things scrubbed out and most of the people fired, like Musk is talking about doing to Twitter. All right. I want all of that done, kick these people out and let them go make a living. All right. And all of these, the AMA and some of these other politicized medical trade groups that did everything they could to starve out the people in their profession that had a much more scientific view. I want those organizations defenestrated, and I want new management coming in there. When these people give up the power that they had to abuse the American people, and when they're out on the street, then we can talk about an amnesty. What we can't talk about is leaving the same bad apples in place that made this monstrous set of mistakes in the first place, and just say, oh, okay, well, hey, I hope it was a learning experience so that when you do this to us again, maybe we can get a better effect. Bullshit. No amnesty, no forgiveness without repentance, and no repentance without serious reckoning and consequences to these people. I want them out. I want all of these these Congress critters and senators and governors, and especially this president and these bureaucrats. I want every single one of them out on their ass. Okay, I want a bunch of people who have had a much better idea about how to protect public health in positions of power. Okay, and then we can talk about it. And I'll just say this. I don't want anybody who ever thought about writing for the Atlantic to have anything to do with public health policy in America. And then we can talk about an amnesty. Okay, because you failed. All right. And at the end of the day, I demand for the money that we have to pay for this government and all of the different, things that feed off of it, whether it's pharma or the medical industry or any of that, for that kind of money, because we spend more than anybody else in the world, and it's not even close, on a per capita basis. These people make unbelievable amounts of money, and they suck. They absolutely suck. And they proved it during COVID. So for the kind of money that we're spending, I want excellence. And what I have seen from these people is not excellence. It's garbage. It's third world crap. It's a bunch of power hungry bums who can't do anything right, who have trashed public health. Let me just, I'm going to go a little bit off the field, but so what, next to age, what's the number one comorbidity factor with COVID? Weight. Right? Yeah. You can't be a fatty. You can't be obese. Okay. Mm-hmm. It killed obese people like there's no tomorrow. How come the public health establishment in this country didn't put it on a national health kit? Right? Hey, everybody in America's got to lose 20, 25 pounds right now because it'll stop COVID. That was the moment, which we all know that as a country, we're too fat. Hell, I'm too fat. I need to lose 30 pounds. The whole freaking public health establishment should have said, look, if you're not old, the number one thing you can do to avoid getting COVID is to get in better physical condition. So, let's open up the high school track everywhere in America, and we're going to give you $1,500 if you can run a mile in 12 minutes or something. Whatever
but the thing is, these people were wearing masks outside. They actually made children fatter through this thing.
No, I get it. That's what I'm saying.
You're concerned about the global thing. You know what scares me is that governmental power could not have happened if my next door neighbor, which she was fine, by the way, but I'm just saying, our neighbors who sat there and were all for this, they did a poll and something like 60%, 54% of Democrats wanted to take away the children of people who didn't get vaccinated.
I know.
I'm sorry. The government doesn't have the power to do what it did. I kept saying this on Twitter. The pandemic is over when the American people say it is. That's when it'll be done. Because, I had to laugh here in Texas. Target had these rules about who could come in or not, right, into the store, right? And at a certain point, which wasn't too far into it, everybody just was like, the poor kid at the front who was like the mask police. Everybody just kind of, the middle-aged people just blew past him and were like, what's he going to do? Tackle everybody not coming in with a mask? And then it ended. And so then, months and months and months later, the Target announces that they're changing their rules. And I started laughing. I was like, dude, those rules were over a year ago in my local Target because the people said it was done. And I think this is the problem. We have a nation full of vindictive, stupid sheep. And this is what was revealed. We don't have to wonder how Mao's struggle sessions happened. We don't have to wonder how Stalin happened. We don't have to wonder how, people could live next door to a gas chamber and be like, what? After it was all done. We have just lived through our neighbors being okay if we lost our job, lost our children, went to jail. Every kind, it's still happening in the military. There's guys who have given their lives basically to the United States and her people, and they are worried about being booted out of the special forces, which it costs some like $2 million to train one of these people, and they're being booted out because right now, because they're refusing to get vaccinated because they're at the fittest age and their highest risk of myocarditis, and so it is logical for a man who's in his 20s or 30s to be like, you know what? I don't want to die of a heart attack getting something that if I got would be a cold. For a skinny fit dude, it's a cold. And I know that there's exceptions to the rule. And then when the CDC said yes to the vaccine for children, and they have no risk. Do you know that the risk from flu is like at least 10 times higher? The hospital, I was at Texas Children's yesterday, by the way, the waiting room is full. You know what it's full of? Not COVID. It's full of flu and RSV.
That's right.
And so, this is absolutely not, in my opinion. But the biggest thing is that we have degraded so much as a country that the average citizen has no problem. Things that should be anathema to an American, to be okay with an innocent person being hauled off to jail in front of their children because they're not wearing a mask by the ocean outside. That should infuriate people. And it didn't.
Yeah.
And people were
half the country infuriated. The other half voted for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And
so they could be safe. And look what's happening now. The excess mortality is higher.
Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, the fentanyl problem was there. It was pre-existing before COVID. It's exploded. And it's not just because the border is open.
Yeah.
Okay. It's exploded. And I mean, these are not, we'll ultimately probably do at least a segment on fentanyl in the future, but those are not overdoses. Those are poisonings.
Yes.
Okay. Those are people taking pills because they need something, because they're depressed and all the other stuff that results from being in a culture that's as sick as ours is. Okay. Yeah. And then getting those pills that they're taking are laced with fentanyl that drug cartels, got from China and brought over here to make a quick buck. All right. And nobody in the entire public health establishment, nobody in our government gives a damn. All right. Because the people that's happening to, generally speaking, are flyover country. They're the type of folks that they don't care about. That sea of red that we talked about in the last podcast, they don't care about these people. And this is well, what about the homeless?
I mean, that's happening. The homeless out in California or whatever. I mean, it doesn't take much fentanyl, even for a hardcore addict. See also George Floyd, to kill anybody. I mean, that's what he really ultimately died from. So here's the thing. I'm going to transition to the next topic because it links to this. So throughout all of this, we find out that the Department of Homeland Security, Big Pharma, is working with Twitter to filter what we can and can't say and who we can say it to. So all the people who were right, by the way, were being filtered, and the only message that could be given was from the government and Big Pharma. And so Elon Musk takes over Twitter and reveals some of the messaging. Now we have a constitutional issue because the government is actively stifling what Americans can say through a private business. And if I am not wrong about this, but there's a word for that, and I think it's called fascism. And we have it right.
Textbook definition of fascism.
It's a textbook I mean, I was like, this is it. And we're always hearing about this, problem out here with Trump or whatever. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but this kind of message control and everything, and the lefties are completely freaking out, which just shows you how much power that they've had to control the narrative via all of these different systems. So I don't know, how hopeful are you that Twitter is going to be the marketplace of ideas again?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. You can already see a colossal difference over the space of 5 days since really Wednesday or Thursday of last week, I think, was when kind of the shackles came off of Twitter. It was really kind of fun to watch because all the conservatives were on Twitter going, let me see if I can say this. Like, I didn't get banned. Oh, well, then let me see if I can say this. And it was so funny because by Friday, people were just, posting like, quick little things like, there are only two sexes. And it was like, it was amazing to see how much of that was there. And it was because you couldn't say that for 5 years. Like they would delete your tweet. They would ban you for 7 days. They would do all this different kind of stuff, fact check you and the whole bit. And like all of that is gone. And of course, it's been super instructive as that has all gone to watch, sort of the mainstays, the George Takeis and the Robert Reiches and the Rob Reiners and the rest of these sanctimonious shitbags that are, like Twitter has promoted, like they get this guy 50 million, Twitter followers. God knows how many of them are bots, but like somehow George Takei was like, I don't know, interesting enough to have all those many people on Twitter. And that was a fraud because the guy is the most boring, like useless guy there is. He was a bit part actor a zillion years ago on a show that was on TV. The original Star Trek was like 2 seasons or something. Like people don't even realize it was like, they did like 50 shows. And he was in a John Wayne movie about Vietnam. Believe it or not, like when the guy was 20 something years old, he actually played like a South Vietnamese, like special forces commando guy. And then he was Sulu. And then that was it. Like, that's this guy's entire career. He's a complete D-list nobody who turned up on Twitter. And all of a sudden he's like, oh, really influential. And I'm like, with who? Anyway, him and Meathead Rob Reiner and freaking Robert Reich, who was like a thing because why? Like, this guy was a moron in the Clinton administration a zillion years ago. And other than the fact that he's like the shortest economist in the world, I think that's actually a thing. I think he's like literally the shortest economist in the world. He's like a midget, mental and otherwise. And these guys are the ones that you're supposed to pay attention to on Twitter. And they were always like, none of them ever had an interesting take. And they're like, to this day, I still get, and I don't follow any of these people. I go on Twitter and there is always something from clowns like John Pawlowski and John Cooper and Rick Wilson. And it's like, why am I getting this in my feed? Because I don't follow these clowns. They have nothing interesting to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an algorithm that does that. Like, if
they're promoted.
So you get this, and it's like, yeah, but nobody cares what these guys think. I mean, like literally nobody. Like everything they post, they get ratioed, and of course now they get ratioed. Right. Because they kind of got ratioed before, and now they really get ratioed because the fact of the matter is you can actually tell these people what you think now. And of course, but that just means there's so much hate speech on Twitter. It's like, no, this is people being honest finally and voicing the fact that the crap that comes out of these morons' mouths is actual crap. And that's the really interesting thing is like it really is pulling back the curtain so that you can see that all of these people that were supposedly so influential and were like, so necessary to the public conversation are not. They don't represent of a large proportion of the population. They represent a very, very small portion of the population. And the number one thing Elon Musk is doing, that he at least plans to do, that I am so, I think was so brilliant, is he says, okay, all of these guys with blue checks, it's going to cost you $20 a month now. Because honestly, that blue check system is not like, there was never any merit to it. It was just, the little Twitter people that work there, were like giving their friends out blue checks and then like making everybody else beg for them. All right. And it had no, I mean, like you're verified, like who cares? Like what difference does it make? Right.
Well, the thing is, originally the original verification was, and this was a real problem at the beginning. So like there was a couple things that they did. One, the verification was so that if somebody like me, so like I had 25, 30, 40,000 followers, and I never juiced the system or anything like that. But there were about 4 or 5 accounts who were pretending to be me. And I'm like a nobody. But it was a problem because the average person would see my picture, wouldn't notice that there's a Z instead of an S at the end of the Twitter profile and think that I had said something. Right. And so that was a real problem at the beginning. And people would do that because they would get quick followings. And because people would think there was someone else. But like Twitter and I went to war almost immediately when it started. This was at the beginning, because the way they gave out the verification was so hacky and it was so arbitrary. Right. And so like I was always talking crap about the leadership at Twitter. Well, they put me on this kind of suppression, whatever list. So every time I'd get up to 55,000, they would knock me down by like 15,000. They would just take away whatever. So for years, like algorithmically, it's like impossible. But there was this kind of war. So they have this whole list of verified. And I don't know if you remember, like a year or two ago, all the verified accounts kind of got frozen. They couldn't tweet for a while. Well, I'm not verified, but that happened to me. So I was like, oh, so I am on their list, but they're just being shitty. They just want to, because I've talked crap about them for so long. The problem is so like now, then you have like a mid-tier person on the left. Well, they just as they, suppress and don't let people see your feed and don't let anybody see. So like I protected my account like a month ago because I was like, oh, all of a sudden my engagement shot up. People who hadn't seen me for years all of a sudden saw me. And so I was like, screw it. I mean, they're suppressing me so much. I might as well keep it protected. And so like, but now people who used to get a ton of engagement, right? Like a ton of comments and stuff are getting zero because they're not being helped by the algorithm the other way. So we bring some merit back to the system online, and a lot of celebrities are unhappy. A lot of D-list people like George Takei are going to be unhappy. All of these people are going to be unhappy. And oh well.
Look, I think Twitter can live without Taya Leone and Ken Olin and Shonda Rhimes.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can get through my day without seeing tweets from Taya Leone, who
I have my whole life on Twitter.
Like absolutely, sage human being, I'm sure. But it's like, oh, I'm leaving Twitter. And it's like, you posted 11 tweets saying that you were leaving Twitter, which tells me that it's your publicist that's on Twitter and not you. Right. And they're like, let's milk me leaving Twitter as much as I possibly can. And it's like, just get the hell off of here. Why don't you? I mean, the whole thing, all of this has really kind of devolved into a mess, right? Like, but the neat thing about it is with Musk buying it, and of course it's so funny because dumbass Robert Reich goes on there last night. He says, Elon Musk must relinquish Twitter because he posted this thing that was kind of a troll job on the New York Times, and then he ended up deleting, and it was all about Paul Pelosi's thing or whatever.
Right.
He must relinquish Twitter. It's like, he paid $44 billion to own this thing lock, stock, and barrel. What do you mean relinquish it?
It's his.
Guy buys a house and he freaking landscapes his yard different than you like, and you come in and knock on his front door. You have to leave your house. You know what's going to happen? He's going to kick you in the nuts, and rightly so. And I mean, nothing's going to happen to little Bobby Reich because he said that. But I mean,
yeah,
it's like it's the stupidest thing I've ever freaking seen, that this idiot thinks that he's in a position to dictate to a guy that paid $44 billion for a social media app, oh, you have to do thus and so. And it's like, who the hell do you think you are? And that is really that is the question that everybody on the left that's on that app right now, kicking and screaming like a 3-year-old. All right. They all need to get that question in their face. Who the hell do you think you are? Because for the last 10 years, we have had to, these people have actually driven the conversation. Things would be said on Twitter by certain people that Twitter's, employees favored. And those things would make their way onto the legacy media, these tweets. Mm-hmm. Right. Journalists didn't even bother interviewing people. They just went and read, oh, I need to go talk to someone. I'll just go read his Twitter. And they would do that. And then from there, they would some left-winger said something. And then they'd make an entire news story. And this happened at Politico. It happened at The Hill. It happened at every one of these political publications would go, I'd spend an hour on Twitter and write an article. Okay. And I mean, look, and the stuff, I've done that too. I'm not trying to just, castigate all the little millennial reporters that have done it. But this is ABC News. This is the New York Times. This is the Washington Post that have all done this, and that they have basically taken 256 characters. All of a sudden, makes you a source for the mainstream media. And there's no real journalism there. There's no actual perspective. The whole thing is a complete mess. And I mean, Twitter has value, but no, call that guy and have a conversation with him and find out what he really says that he can't say in 256 characters. And maybe there's some understanding that can be passed along in the story you write. But they don't even do any of that. Okay. And so now we're in a situation where that little closed loop environment that they made over the last 10 years where they suppressed half of the country has now been blown open. Okay. And so when you're, whoever at the Washington Post and you want to do journalism, quote unquote, the way you've been doing it, and so you go grab somebody's tweet, oh, I'll just embed this in my article. And then somebody clicks on the tweet and sees that this guy got ratioed by 5,000 people telling him what a jackass he is. You can't write that article like that anymore. Like, you can't do it, because in the comments under your article, you're going to get ratioed, right? By the same people who are going to turn around and make you look like a complete jackass. And even dumb millennial reporters that work at some of these newspapers are going to be in a situation like, I can't do it that way. And if they aren't in that situation, the editors will be like, look, the advertisers are complaining because we have to shut our comment section down because all of our articles are just disgusting how bad the comments are because you opened us up to this ridicule, right? So it's a totally different deal when you have a fair fight on Twitter. And the thing of it is, and I know why they did what they did with Twitter, okay? Because the way that app works is built for the right, okay? Yeah. It's built for the right. And they did. I don't think they ever realized it when they invented Twitter and they put it out there was, what you can do with memes and what you can do with one-liners. Because the thing about, look, conservative philosophy is a whole lot of common sense, and it's a whole lot of history, and it's a whole lot of things that everybody knows. And the left their entire project is to try to convince people not to know what they know, right? Right. And so it's
been very effective.
Well, I mean, and like the meme is the left can't meme. Okay. Right. They show it over and over and over again that they can't meme, but the right can meme. And so when you stop suppressing conservatives, and I mean, it's instructive. One of the things that Elon said when he took the thing over, he says, comedy is now legal on Twitter, right? Yeah. And it's true because, Halloween has come up and there's this spirit Halloween costume things, and people have just, it's like the funniest memes you ever saw have popped up for that. But and the thing is there's so much difference between how the right does it and how the left does it, and the right is just so much more entertaining. And so,
that's okay, in real life, I'm sorry to be talking over you, and we're not supposed to do that, but I was just thinking about how Greg Gutfeld is succeeding and how there's just kind of a joyfulness and a true conservative is a happy warrior, like Reagan talked about. You're happy. And so I was thinking about, Obama being back, to switch to another subject, and Joe Biden, who's obviously creepy and has a problem with children. Yeah. And we have this contrast here of this kind of worshipful Obama-ness, and he's just kind of a mean, nasty person, very highbrow. And the way you get under the skin of a guy like that, I mean, of course, the Democrats love it. Oh my goodness, they love it. And so do the GOP insiders in DC. They love that kind of arch humor at the expense of the average person. And then you have Biden, who was foisted on America by the media and everything else. And
Obama.
Yeah. And by Obama. And we're supposed to just play along, we're just supposed to play along and not see. I'm like, this is the thing about Biden's, pedo problem. I don't understand how people can't see it. How do you not see him feeling up his granddaughter to put and purposely trying to touch her and then, kiss her on the mouth? It's so gross and such a power play. And the people on the left are like, that's just a normal grandpa. I'm like, I joked for years that the problem with feminist women is that they're around left left-wing men. The reason they hate men is because they're around left-wing men.
Right.
But the more this stuff comes out, I'm thinking that is the actual truth. It was a joke. But I mean, if you're around Biden all the time, you'd hate men.
Well, either that or you're a sex addict and want to get around them all the time, like certain people in his family who had diaries that you are not allowed to talk about when they.
No, right. You're not allowed to talk about.
They'll send the FBI out if they did you get a chance to look at this thing? So now you get knocked over by the feds. Look, I think there's a lot to what you just said.
Okay, so everybody agrees that Biden is a creep, and it turns out that Paul Pelosi may or may not be one. Okay, so we're talking about the Musk kind of meme about, and he responded to Hillary Clinton, and all the lefties are like, I have oh, my stars and lights, they're all very upset about this. I got into this with all due respect to Ross Kaminsky, one of our fellow writers at the American Spectator. And he was like, why are you believing conspiracy theories? And I was like, why is it a conspiracy theory when I haven't seen the videotape of Paul Pelosi coming to the door, which everything's on video, right? Like the break-in has to be on video. The first interactions with Paul Pelosi and the hammer incident have to be on video. Show me the video. I don't want to hear the DOJ. I don't want to hear the FBI who cover up for these weirdos. I don't want to hear about any of this. When it's 2:00 in the morning and he's in a hammer fight in his underwear with some crazy lefty nudist who is now being portrayed somehow as a Trump supporter.
Right.
What? I don't believe it. And I'm sorry, you're going to have to prove it. We still don't know who was in the car with Paul Pelosi when he got pulled over for drunk driving. And they were going to make that go away until the outcry was there. And then they slapped him on the wrist and he got community service or something. And so we still don't have the full story of that. And we're supposed to just take the word, and people will say, well, why aren't you taking the word of the cops? I don't know, because how easy is it to pay off these people? Show us the video. Right. Show us the video, and then fine. But don't call me a conspiracy theorist, because I won't take the line, take it hook, line, and sinker and just believe this stuff. And so I see this. So there's this kind of rhetorical bullying that happens and it happened with COVID. We've had 50 different things now. It happened on Twitter. You could never say anything about Obama, and Biden was completely lucid. And if you say something about Fetterman, who's like brain dead, we see the same thing now. And it's the bullying by the media and by the kind of the politicians and everything. And the butt of every joke is MAGA. I'm not even MAGA, I'm just like an average right-leaning person, and who likes Trump in some ways and doesn't, but I don't view him as like Satan. So that makes me some kind of crazy person, evidently. And I can see his aptitudes, honestly. So that somehow makes me a Trumpster or something. It's just baloney. So you have this vindictive kind of name calling constantly. So we can't question anything, or else we're a conspiracy theorist and some kind of QAnon thing. I'm like, I don't even know what QAnon really is. And I think it's all baloney. And I basically got rid of all those followers on Twitter because they were as annoying as the Obama birthers. But I am sick of this. Okay, so, what say you about this whole Paul Pelosi thing and everything?
Well, okay, so there are all these rumors about Paul Pelosi, and I'm not going to get into all of that other than look, it's San Francisco. Everybody knows anything goes over there. All right. I mean, the kind of morality that the rest of the country engages in is laughed at in that city. Plain and simple. We know this. We also know that this assailant is in that scene. Okay. So it's not totally implausible that this could have been what everybody was kind of snickering that it was. I actually think that it turns out that it's much more likely that this is something else that's embarrassing to the Democrats, which is that when you, first of all, embrace drug abuse as just another lifestyle choice, which they clearly have, and in California, it's just off the freaking charts how bad it is. And you're 100% lawless. Like what happened to the Pelosi's happens to people in San Francisco all the time. It's a big deal because it's Nancy Pelosi's husband, but there are people that get burglars come into their house all the freaking time in San Francisco. That place is a lawless, literal shithole where there's poop all over the streets that they don't do anything about when people like David DePapi are living their not exactly best life. All right. It's no less ridiculous than the idea that this guy is some right-wing freaking MAGA assassin, okay? Which is exactly what they came out with. We know a number of things. The first thing we know is that the official story on this, okay, is BS, right? We know it's BS. This whole idea that, oh, this is somebody, and he comes in and he's going to do this whole, thing with the hammer, and he's there to get Nancy Pelosi and all that. Like, that's a crock. We know it's a crock. And the reason we know it's a crock is because, first of all, there was a third person that opened the door when the cops came in. And they're like, oh, no, there's not a third person. Now it was Paul Pelosi who opened the door.
With a hammer in his head? Like, I'm wondering.
The door, and he's like fighting with the guy over a hammer. And he opens the door. So, like, we're supposed to believe that this guy, from that fact pattern and this kind of weirdness, that all of this that they've told us, that the official story gets weirder and weirder every time they tweak it. We're supposed to believe that, oh, but this guy was a MAGA assassin. Like, he's a MAGA assassin. Like, we're supposed to believe that because that's what they tell us. And it's like, yeah, but you could, like Melissa, like you said, you lied about everything. You lied about Trump and Russia. You lied about, you lied about Benghazi. Would go back years and years. You lied about, we talked all show about COVID and how they lied about that and how they've insisted on controlling the narrative to push things that nobody agrees with. The transgender piece, the critical race theory piece. You could go on and on. Almost every major news meme in America today is a lie that every average American can look at and say, that's a bunch of crap. Why am I supposed to believe that? And now they're going to be like, oh, by the way, the hippie gay nudist, drug addict, homeless guy who lives in a commune in Berkeley, or did, that all the neighbors like, oh yeah, that guy's completely whacked out and nuts, and all of those people are, oh yeah, that is a MAGA assassin. Like, I'm supposed to believe that? And so the counter meme is, oh, it must have been a gay tryst gone wrong. And you say, oh, that's horrible that you guys did that. It's like, yeah, but it's no more a lie than the crap they're trying to feed us. So if they're gonna call you a conspiracy theorist for throwing something else out there, you might as well get your money's worth. And that's mean, and it's terrible, and it's nasty, but that's actually where we are, because they have said these things, not the gay tryst thing, but like other stuff that's just as bad. They have said this about people on the right for years. And now that folks are free to actually express themselves a little bit, they're going to freaking run with it. And you can't blame them because, hey, it's nasty, but it's fun. And you know what? It's no more of a lie than the lie agreed upon that we're supposed to freaking believe, that somehow I'm responsible for David DePapi whacking this dude with a hammer under circumstances that nobody finds plausible. So, you know what? Screw you guys. And if they want to have some fun with the gay tryst meme, knowing that Paul Pelosi didn't die, and knowing that this thing was, at least the narrative around it is cooked up to try to save the Democrats in the election. Hey, you know what? Run with it. What the hell? Everybody's nasty in American politics now. So be nasty. And we'll sort it out later after we've had an election and our side wins. And then we can maybe declare an amnesty on the Pelosi humor after the fact, when we're in control. Because that's how the rules work these days, right? And so, the hell with it. I'm not judging anybody if they want to get nasty about the Pelosi thing. It doesn't mean that I necessarily buy that story, but I certainly don't buy the official narrative. So anything goes. And how about that?
Well, for 4 years, people credulously talked about Trump having, them having a P tape, acted like that they had proof. And so we have a legit, the rumors around San Francisco. We have a previous instance where Paul Pelosi, the police, everybody else was willing to cover up what he had done. And so now we're supposed to believe. And then the FBI ran in and the DOJ is running in to, and we also have a history of them, by the way, fabricating evidence, which is what they did in Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer. Yep. So I'm sorry. No, the burden of proof is on you. Show me the video. And until then, I believe nothing. I want to see the blood coming out of Paul Pelosi's head. And until I see that, I don't believe it. And so that's just my, perspective on that. Do I think that violence is terrible? Yes. Do I think that we should keep illegal aliens out for just this reason? Yes. It's important for us to know. But I'm sorry, San Francisco is a sanctuary city, and you keep psychotic, drug abusing, nudists, stepchild pedos, because that's what he is, in the country because you're just such good people. And so when a guy like that attacks you, well, maybe change your laws and maybe take this seriously, because if you weren't Paul Pelosi, no one would know about this hammer attack, and you would have to suffer while the criminal was once again let out for his many felonies. And so all those people who've been his victims up until this point matter just as much as Paul Pelosi and Nancy Pelosi. So I'm done. Okay, with that, we have to be finished here. We started angry. We're ending angry. Yeah, I don't know.
How does this happen? How does this happen? All this aggression out, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've got 2 weeks to see if the American people are as pissed off as we are about this just ridiculous, continual crap that we're being fed from the Biden administration, the media, and all of our institutions. So hopefully all of you who are watching us, thank you, Scott, for, jumping in and being there again today. And thank you for all of you for watching us. Please subscribe, please share, put your comments down there in the comment section. Thank you for those of you who have commented and your nice comments, but really anything you think that we can do to make this better. This is a shorter one. We were having some tech issues. We're going to get all this figured out. We're going to get this all figured out. But thank you for joining us, everybody, and make sure and go out and vote. I think we have 78 hours or 72 hours now left of early voting. And then 2 weeks, and then it's time to vote if you haven't already. And so with that, we'll be done and see you next week.